Our gospel lists Jesus, Peter, James, John, Moses, and Elijah. That's quite a cast of characters on that unnamed high mountain, the New Testament version of the Old Testament Mount Sinai. Most of us probably know that Matthew's transfiguration scene is simply his attempt to portray Jesus as the new Moses as well as the new Elijah. For example, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of 10 commandments, everyone saw that the skin of his face was aglow. It had become radiant because he had spoken with God. Moses was transfigured. What most impresses me about this scene is not that group of 6 notables or even Jesus' appearance. No, it's that shadow caused by a bright cloud from which the voice of God was heard. Let's look at the word shadow. We use it in many ways. When we are impressed with someone, we might say, "He casts a long shadow." When someone has us beat and we feel inferior, we might say, "I'm overshadowed by her. I'm in her shadow." When we're suspicious of someone and we fear what he might be up to, we might say, "He lurks in the shadows." For TV viewers and vampire lovers, there's the old soap opera and recent movie Dark Shadows. Now, some of you probably thought I was going to mention Bella and Edward from the Twilight movies. Then again, shadows do lengthen at twilight. For the kids here today, we can't forget about Peter Pan. Peter Pan lost his shadow when he went to visit Wendy and the children, and then Wendy sewed it on. On a hot and humid Cape Cod summer day, we seek cool shadows to escape the heat. For old-time radio listeners, there's the Shadow, the comic book crime fighter who actually is the model for Batman. On the radio, one would hear, "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows." The idea of a shadow figures very prominently in the movie Shadowlands. It's the story of the British professor and Christian writer C.S. Lewis, author of the Chronicles of Narnia and so many other Christian books, Surprised by Joy, A Grief Observed. Lewis was a shy bachelor who much later in his life was transfigured by the joy of love that he didn't expect to come his way. He often wrote about love, pain, and suffering. But when the woman he eventually married and learned he couldn't live without died of cancer, he came out of his shadowlands and into the light because he knew that he had experienced real life with real love, and yes, accompanying pain and suffering. Otherwise, he was just a shadow of a man. Many of us live in our own shadowlands. They are the places deep within us where we hide, perhaps from love, perhaps from God. C.S. Lewis certainly did early on in his life because he was an atheist. His and our shadow lives are the internal, dim, and dark places where we want to be alone, to avoid hurt, to avoid commitment, and to avoid God. Thank God we have Jesus as our guide to get us out of those shadows and then to help us with our own personal transformations, those transfigurations, so we can love and love well. Jesus casts a very long shadow, but even so, we are never overshadowed by him. He never lurks in the shadows because he's out in the light where he calls to us. He's not the movie vampire that feeds on our blood for strength. On the contrary, He gave and he still gives us his body and blood through the Eucharist to strengthen us. When we feel the heat of everyday living, those stresses and those strains, we can retreat to the soothing, cool shade that Jesus always provides. When we feel guilty about something we have done, or maybe what we haven't done, through forgiveness, Jesus, in a way, sews our shadows back on. He reminds us that we all have a darker, a shadow side, the part of us that sins. And it's a reality that we really can't deny and that we really shouldn't fear. We should recognize it and deal with it. After all, when we're in the light, we have a shadow. It's the irony of our existence, the coexistence of our opposing light and dark sides that make us human. And this is especially important this time of our church year, during Lent. I end with this gospel passage. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them. Then from the cloud God said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And why should we listen to Jesus? Well, the answer is quite simple. The shadow knows.